All right, good evening. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our BSC Career Speaker Series. Let me just keep an eye. We'll make sure. I think folks are still joining us from the waiting room, but we will go ahead and get started. So good evening. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We've got a fantastic career speaker series lined up for you. If I haven't yet had a chance to meet you, my name is Jessica Yinka Thomas, and I am wearing two hats today because this talk is doing double duty for us here at NC State. I'm really excited to have the opportunity to welcome Tony Pease, the founder and CEO of Caramus and an NC State alum. Tony is going to be kicking off our BSC Career Speaker Series for the spring. And so today's talk is both part of our career development resources as the Business Sustainability Collaborative in the Poole College of Management, where we are focused on preparing the next generation of leaders to use business as a force for good. And so we've created this speaker series as an opportunity for students from across campus to have the opportunity to hear from NC State alumni like Tony who are leading and innovating when it comes to sustainability careers. This is also a guest lecture in my MBA 582 hat, so another hat that I wear. MBA 582 class, the B Corp Clinic Sustainability Practicum. And so this module, we are focused on studying sustainability through an entrepreneurship and innovation lens. And I think Tony is a really fantastic speaker who's going to share with us his entrepreneurship journey, his 20 years of experience building early stage tech companies, including his most recent venture, Caramus, which is a technology company focused on really leading when it comes to social impact gaming. And so I'm really excited for the opportunity for all of us to hear about Tony's career trajectory, his experience in entrepreneurship, and really building technology tools that can drive sustainability and innovation, and give us some insights into what are some of the key issues in the business world today. And so just for a little bit of housekeeping before I hand it over to Tony to get us started, please keep yourself off of mute, keep yourself on mute. We will be sharing questions in the chat, so feel free to share your question as it comes up. And Rachel Haynes, thank you, Rachel, for your words of welcome. Rachel Haynes, our BSc program manager, and I will be moderating the chat. If we have an opportunity to bring your question into the conversation, we'll invite you to take yourself off of mute and share your question directly with Tony. And any questions that we don't get through during Tony's presentation, he's got about 30 minutes of prepared slides. We'll tackle those at the end. And so with that, I am absolutely delighted to hand it over to Tony Pease, who's an NC State alum from the College of Engineering, and who has really graciously agreed to speak, share his inspiration and expertise with us this evening. So Tony, I will hand it over to you, and thanks so much again for coming back to campus virtually, as it were. We are so fortunate to have an incredible alumni network out there, and you're such a great example of that.
Well, thank you, Jessica. I'm certainly happy to be here, and I appreciate you all tuning in for this. I will say, as a one order of business, I did find out a couple weeks ago that my oldest daughter got into NC State. So she's trying to decide amongst her college. So hopefully we can get her to make the right choice here. I am Tony Pease. I'm the CEO and founder of Caramus. I'm going to kind of walk through my experience and talk about some of my lessons learned and some of the things about how I think about sustainability, sustainable development, and as it applies to business models, which is a real area of interest of mine. So before we really get started in that, I wanted to just give a little bit of my background because I think it tells some of the story about why I'm interested in sustainability. I was an enlisted Navy nuclear technician, so that's somebody who ran the nuclear reactor on a submarine. And I did that for 6 years. And one of the things that I got the opportunity to do is learn a lot about power generation, ships' life support systems, and the handling of, I would say, the handling of material that could be not environmentally friendly. So I think the Navy does a really good job of making sure that waste doesn't get off the boat, and a lot of important environmental behaviors there. And so that was one of the areas that really started seeding my thoughts about how engineering and environmentalism intersect. From there, I went back to school for a mechanical engineering degree at NC State. After I completed my degree in mechanical engineering, I realized I didn't really want to be in manufacturing. I wanted to be in software, and I had the opportunity to join a company that I eventually became one of the owners of, called iCubed. iCubed specialized in software for manufacturing industries, so that was a good way for me to leverage some of my past experience, but really get into the software field, which I was much more interested in because the development cycles were much faster. So you could, when you're a mechanical engineer, you're solving problems pretty slowly. It's got to be designed and built. But when you're a software engineer, you can do things pretty quick. So some of the really good ones can fix problems overnight and create these great interfaces. And I just really fell in love with the speed of problem solving. We sold iCubed to a company in 2014. Around that time, we also co-founded another company called ICI Digital, also in software, which we sold in 2016, and I was a co-founder of that business. And then around that same time, I co-founded Karamis, which is my current company. So as you can see, pretty much since I graduated from NC State, I've been on the entrepreneurial track. And for a number of reasons, I feel most comfortable when I have the opportunity to solve the problems that I'm most interested in. And so being an entrepreneur certainly allows you to do that. So one of the things about Karamis is it actually stands for Care I Must. And so when I founded the company, I had been working for large Fortune 500 companies in various capacities. Think about it as a technical services consultant, doing things that really didn't matter to me that much, like creating a software program that saved 2% on axle manufacturing costs for Caterpillar. And so when we started Karamis, I wanted to see if we could build this company to be at the intersection of social impact and profitability. So creating a profitable business model is something that we all started spending our time and interested on. So Karamis does a couple of things, and I'll give you a quick introduction to the company. So we are Raleigh based. We're about 40 or so people in the company now, a few people scattered around the US, but most everybody's in Raleigh, just on Lake Boone Trail, so just a little west of campus. And we are award-winning creative digital strategy and digital transformation agency. And so what we aspired to do at Karamis is we wanted to work on problems that had a high social impact, but were also profitable. As part of the background, we specialize in some industries. We won't go into the details here, but really we're working with large organizations. And the reasons why we work with large organizations is because they're the most financially durable businesses that we can work with. We started working with startups, but the problem is startups is that they typically run out of funding, they can fail. So as part of the financial responsibility aspect of Karamis, we decided to focus our business on larger organizations. Now, back to the social impact side, what made us unique is we were thinking about how do we create a profitable business in a way that is also viable in the long term, but creates an ROI for specific customers. And we were thinking about this idea of sustainability. And sustainability, when we were starting Karamis, this was about the rise of B Corps and the ESG programs and things of that nature. And so what we wanted to do was we wanted to combine all of our capabilities around the aspects of ESG that were meaningful and accretive to the businesses. And that means taking their unique visions and goals, strategizing how they were going to roll out various ESG programs, focusing on engagement, and then building services and tools that allowed them to do that and allowed them to facilitate their unique ESG goals. And so one of the things that we focus on is helping businesses find authentic ESG programs that work for them. So we don't want people doing greenwashing type activities. We want people focusing on things that make sense to their core values and their employees. And then we work on building programs around those that are value aligned with those goals. And then we use technology to activate their employees, customers, partners, and stakeholders. And again, this is really just setting the stage for a couple of the services and products we're going to talk about today on my creating a profitable business around the ESG world. Before we do dig into Jewelbug and the specific products, the way Karamis has actually realized its vision is taking every step with the lens of how can we make the three pillars of profitability, people, and technology work together. So one of the things that most people are surprised to know that we did is we actually did the brand and we did the technology rebuild for the Puerto Rican National Energy Grid. So the Puerto Rican National Energy Grid was a notoriously unstable grid run by a company called PREPA. And one of our partners had a $10 billion project from the federal government to go rebuild the energy grid. And so we're not digging lines or we're not helping with power transmission. But what we did was we helped activate the brand. We helped the citizens of Puerto Rico understand how they could access technology and use technology to enable their experience with their energy company. So one of the things to note is that before we came into the picture, the average Puerto Rican citizen would have to wait in line to start and stop their service or pay their bill. And we rolled out a completely mobile first digital technology that allows them to pay their bills online, but also get things like outage management. So if there's a storm coming, preparedness, and when they're going to be, when their power might come back on. So a lot of the technologies and capabilities that Karamis does as a brand were able to be applied to this opportunity Luma in a profitable way that hit all the marks for us. So one of the current products that we're going to talk about a little bit today is how do we activate sustainable behaviors within employees. So if most of you are pretty well versed on what ESG programs are, there's a couple of different ways that people think about sustainability: scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. So a lot of companies are doing really well in the scope 1. Think about industrial activities, which are putting solar panels on, making more efficient buildings and making more durable supply chains that are sustainable. And then at the bottom of the funnel of sustainability is scope 3. So scope 3 is packaging, people's use, transportation. It's the behaviors that people take that are participants of the company. And that's where we wanted to focus. So the question we wanted to help our clients answer is, how do you engage your broader team in a sustainable journey? And so that they can be participants and advocates of your sustainable tools or your sustainable objectives rather than just be recipients of it. And so we built Jewelbug. One of our previous business partners was working on this as a side. We brought this into Karamis, and we've been really working on making Jewelbug a tool that enables teams and cultures to allow broad-based sustainability training and engagement. And so Jewelbug, you can look it up. It's jewelbug.com. It's actually very easy to use and easy to set up for your company. And we'll dig into a little bit of the details about what that is first. But before we get into this, I wanted to highlight one of my big failures in sustainable behaviors and sustainable engagement. So this one wasn't really around sustainability. This one was around ESG. And so some of you may have heard of a product that I built called GoodBookie. So around 2014, I wanted to connect the idea of sports betting with charitable donations. So the problem that we were trying to solve is how do we make it more interesting for people to make donations to charity, because charities have such a tough time raising money. And so we started working on this product called GoodBookie, and GoodBookie was peer-to-peer sports bet where the winner made a tax-deductible donation, or the loser made a tax-deductible donation to the winner's charity. And so we really struggled with this game, if you will, this platform, and we spent several years on it and several $100,000. And ultimately it failed and we had to shut it down. And the reason why it failed is we were trying to adapt to the need. We were trying to adapt to the need of our various clients. So we didn't have a specific product that we were going to market with. We had this technology and this idea, but we didn't know, the people couldn't identify who it was for, what they were going to use it for, how they were going to get value out of it. And then one of the really important pieces, we were focused on the altruistic good versus the value it was creating. So as a company, we were thinking, well, people will love this because it's good, not because it's valuable. And because we weren't really thinking about the value, we didn't think we needed to have a clear business model attached to this platform. And then another thing was sports betting wasn't a passion for our team. And so we learned a lot from a technology component, and maybe under different hands, this idea would actually have legs. But for us, it failed for these reasons. And one of the things that one of the biggest things that I take away is when you're working on something that's in sustainable, in the sustainability field, it has to be durable. It has to have a durable business value. And I'll talk about what that means in a second. So one of the big things that I learned is we have to create something that people are willing to pay for. As much as we'd love to say that people will do the right thing because it's the right thing, it's not ever the case. People will do the right thing because it creates value to them, and value can be discerned in a number of different ways. And particularly when you're talking about business, we needed to think about what specific business value are we creating. So there's three general types of business models that you can think about. We can think about a not-for-profit. And in the United States, not-for-profits, there's probably 3,000 nonprofits in North Carolina alone. And one of the things that makes it tough about running a nonprofit is when people take money for a nonprofit, 80% of that money is expected to be used on the programs. So if you're running a Meals on Wheels, you've got to spend 80% of your money actually delivering food to your clients. And there's no R&D that can happen in that. And that's because 20% goes in overhead. So they're always operating on very lean budgets, and it's very difficult to innovate. On the other side, you have kind of standard for-profit companies. And in a standard for-profit company, it's 80% of the revenue needs to go to cost of goods sold and SG&A. So those are the things that the company pays salaries and expenses to deliver their value. And then the margin needs to occur. So this is the profit margin for a healthy business. And so again, there's a limited R&D spend if it's a profitable company. And then in this case, for a for-profit company, the shareholder value drives the mission, whereas the nonprofit, the donors drive the mission. If you're doing an impact for profit, these are things like B Corp, or there's a couple different categories for that. And there's a lot of examples. So if this is something that you're interested in, I can point you to a couple companies that you can look at. But if you're doing a company that's on an impact for profit, the mission is the impact. And so now the responsibility is that you have to focus on how do you build and generate business value to drive that impact. Any questions so far? One of actually the really cool stories of a public benefit corporation is United Therapeutics, which is also local in Raleigh. So I'm sure all of you know what a certified B Corp is, but if you want to get an idea of a public benefit corporation, United Therapeutics is a great one to look at.
So no questions yet, Tony, but I think just about everybody on this call, if you're an MBA 582, you're already an expert on B Corps. If you're in my MIE 306 class, you're getting there. And if you are on this call and you're not familiar with B Corps or benefit corporations, reach out to the Business Sustainability Collaborative and we'll get you looped in and you'll become an expert before long. So, and I just want to encourage folks to feel free to go ahead and share questions as you've got them in the chat. I'll keep an eye on the chat, and Tony, I'll bring those questions in. So thanks for checking.
Great. Okay, so a lot of these companies, you'll hear this term, the triple bottom line. So the expectation of the triple bottom line is it's focused on people, it's well-being, fair labor, diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is things like health benefits and paternity and maternity leave, and all those things kind of get lumped into that people category. And then planet, of course, making sure that you're a sustainable business model and you're doing no harm to the planet. And then profit, they list as last. Profit, meaning this is the dimension of a healthy business. But the reality is that the profit actually has to come first. So if you're thinking about becoming an entrepreneur and you're thinking about generating a public benefit company or something that's an impact driven company, you've got to think about how is that company going to make money? And it's an unfortunate reality of the times, but when people say triple bottom line, they say profit first, and then people, provided it enables one. And I think some of you who are maybe thinking about how AI impacts the future of of various professions understands that these companies who are saying that they're altruistic, triple bottom line companies are going to be, also looking at AI to replace people's jobs. And then from a planet perspective, people think about the planet provided it meets the minimum legal requirements and number one, which is profit. So this sounds like a really skeptical point of view. But what I want to remind everybody is we can all talk about how important it is for us to do the right things around the world, but money talks. And so you really need to give some consideration to how your business is going to make money so that people are patient when you're going to do the right things for people and when they're patient when you're going to do the right things for the planet. So we have to meet the expectations of the triple bottom line. This is not just about the job that you take, but this is where you work, live, shop, and how you vote. And so we're having, a pretty potentially contentious election cycle that I'm sure nobody's looking forward to. But think about what is important to you from your impact perspective when you're doing these things. So is the electronics manufacturer that you're using sustainably sourcing the lithium that goes in their batteries? If not, what are your alternatives? How can you use your dollars as a way to vote there? But again, when you're thinking about your business, you have to make sure that you're going to run a healthy business. Otherwise, it's not going to be durable. And so for my personal focus, I have this mantra, I'd like to do interesting things with people I like. And I don't really need a different professional value proposition than that. I like to solve complicated problems and I like to work with people that are interesting to me. And then I want to align my personal skill set against my interest and need. And then I find like-motivated people. So not like-minded people. I prefer to be in groups of people that are different, but like-motivated means that they have the same general motivation. So they're interested in solving the same problems. And then from an impact business is no different than a regular business. We got to find a pain point. We got to provide a solution. We got to make that solution easy and intuitive, and we have to build a community loyalty through listening. So those are kind of the 4 tenets of how we look at developing a business. Now I'm going to take a minute here to say what you're up against. So if you want to build a public benefit corporation, or you want to build an impact project or an impact business, ultimately you're going to get some resistance, and you're going to get resistance from all over the place because it's not really just like a Republican or Democrat thing. You can see, from the top, Manchin, who's a Democrat from West Virginia, he's against ESG. Why do we think that is? Potentially because he's heavily invested in the coal industry, and the ESG movement changes the status quo about investing in the coal industry. And then, which I think is probably one of the most ironic people who are against it is Elon Musk. And so nobody has benefited more from the ESG movement personally, financially, than Elon Musk, because obviously there's things of credits for environment or credits for electric vehicles that Teslas were the biggest beneficiary of to date. And so a lot of folks are against this. This is kind of a weird news cycle for these sort of things. ESG, because people are saying that this actually isn't really accretive to business value, but the problem is generally that people are thinking about it in the short term. So if you're not thinking about things in the long term, you may not understand what the benefit of some of these programs around ESG, about long-term supply chain durability. But people who are making investments are. So if you think, one of the really ways that you can understand why the market believes that climate change is a real thing is you just have to look at insurance rates. Look at housing insurance rates during coastal cities. So North Carolina insurance rates are going up. A lot of insurance companies are pulling out of Florida. It's not because they're politically motivated. If they thought there was an opportunity to make money, they would. The reason is because their auditors aren't balancing the risk against climate change to their coverage of the Florida homeowners. So there's a lot of interesting news bites, but ultimately this is kind of reinforcing what I think is the fundamentals of any business, which is the economics. So how does the economics play into this? And so how does economics play into ESG programs? How does it play into anything that has an impact benefit? Well, if you want to get people's attention, you have to create direct business value in the near term so that they can be patient for the long term. So before we get into some of the specifics about what I'm doing with Julebug, I just wanted to take another break here and ask if there are any questions.
Tony, I don't see any questions in the chat, but I've got a question for you that might be on the minds of some of the students on this call. And again, want to encourage folks to share questions in the chat. But just to kind of look at core concepts and definitions, you identified a distinction between ESG and sustainability. And so I was just hoping you could spend a couple of minutes just kind of sharing with us how you define each of those and how you think that they are different. And given that today in my MIE 306, my undergrad class, we looked at kind of how broad a range of definitions of sustainability there are and how quickly evolving this space is. And this term ESG, right, is relatively recent kind of part of this broader sustainability space. So I'd love to hear just kind of for you, from your perspective, how you define each of those and how they're, what the overlap and the difference is.
Sure. So the ESG, the term ESG to me is the umbrella coverage of a lot of these impact programs that corporations are focusing. So whether it's directly called out in every company, I consider like the DEI programs to be part of ESG, and I consider sustainability to be part of that. And so sustainability, I think of as a subset of the ESG, of the overall ESG activities. So when you think about something along the lines of an ESG report, an ESG report is generally intended to include all the things that companies are doing. This could be civic engagement, this could be DE&I, this could be investment, volunteering, donation, and then sustainability. And then even with sustainability, sustainability has a number of layers. So sustainability, when we say sustainability, we mean kind of the overall corporate program about how do they create a sustainable, environmentally sustainable business model. So we're actually looking at it from a sustainable, as in, kind of anti-pollution, anti-climate change, those sort of things. Other organizations think about sustainability that may include access to raw materials. And so what we're trying to carve out is that very small subset of sustainability, which can be further described as environmentalism.
Thank you. So that's really interesting to hear. So really ESG kind of you're defining it as kind of the broader space, and sustainability a subset of that, more specifically focused on environmental issues. And so,
Right.
and we're just wrapping up a module in my grad class, MBA 582, with a similar focus, right? Looking at kind of the range of different ways that that sustainability is defined. And we actually looked at an article by Andrew Winston, who's a longtime thought leader in this space and an author at Harvard Business Review. But he talks about the difference, really looking at sustainability as the specific practices and strategies that companies use to drive social and environmental impact. And really ESG as connected to that, but really coming from the financial sector particularly, and really more focused on measuring and quantifying, right? Environmental, so the ESG standing for environmental, social, and governance practices. And so the ESG much more the tools and the metrics to quantify the impacts of a company's sustainability strategy. And so I asked that question, and I share. It was interesting to hear your definition and how you see that landscape, and a contrasting perspective, just to share with everyone on the call that this is a really quickly evolving space, and we could hear 3 or more different kind of definitions and how those two concepts connect depending on different folks that you speak with.
Yeah, and I think that's great to point out, because there is kind of this is a legal category now, and this is part of SEC filings, and there are some rigid definitions, but there's also a philosophy and an approach to this that are still being, like you said, still being defined. And I think the way that we think about it is not just about these publicly traded companies, because the companies that we work with are either publicly traded or going to be publicly traded or private equity backed. They're larger organizations. And what we're trying to communicate is this isn't some additional overhead and responsibility that you need to account for, but this is an opportunity. the opportunity to improve in these categories where the ESG report culminates in the metrics in the report of that impact. And so, yeah, it's interesting. We do jump between kind of the standard definition and how do we apply it. Probably not well, and I think if you're don't listen to me when you're having to answer, create answers for your tests. Definitely refer to the text and the legal definition, but the way that we're trying to describe it as an opportunity.
Yeah. And that's why we want to hear your perspective. We want to bring in the real world, right, into this conversation. We start with the textbook, right, and then we go from there. And I think that's really where the conversation gets interesting. So we do have 2 questions in the chat. So this is good. I think this kind of prompted some questions. And so I think, is it Siona? We're going to go to you first, and I will invite you to take yourself off of mute and share your question if you're able.
Hi, my question's pretty quick. It was just about the tweet about like Elon Musk tweeted. Is that statement true? And if it is, why would Exxon be rated like it by the ESG while Tesla would not?
The statement is true, and the question is who rated it, and the question is what caused that rating. So there are PR campaigns. So there is true with anything that's new, there's going to be grifters. And who's the most likely to be a grifter of this ESG program? It's the people who are doing the most harm. And oil and gas causes the most harm ecologically. That's not a slight about whether we need oil or gas. It's just, I think that from an environmental impact is factual. And so how does Exxon get to be the top 10 is because they lobbied for it. They spend the most money on it, and whatever the quantification of these reports are, is that they get. There's another interesting thing that said where I guess it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago, where Joe Biden said that Mary Barra and Ford was the leader in the EV revolution. And that obviously wasn't true either. So there's a little bit of this politicking and this behavioral manipulation going on to get these names to greenwash. And this is a really good example of greenwashing.
Thank you for sharing that. And we are talking about, yes, greenwashing in my classes as well. And so, Siona, thank you for that question. And thank you, Tony, for clarifying, well, confirming that it is in fact, and helping us see just the challenges in this space, to your point, right, where we've got these new standards, new metrics, and they are not perfect by any measure. And at this early stage, it's still relatively easy to manipulate them. And so we've got another question from Katie, but Katie is in the library and not able to use their microphone. So I'm going to share Katie's question directly. So Katie asks, considering your focus on working with larger companies and your focus on environmental solutions, how do you navigate trade-offs between short-term financial pressures and long-term sustainable development?
That's a really good question. And the thing is that we're trying to go underneath the discretionary budget. So from the trade-offs are a lot of the capital expenditures that companies are spending right now for ESG related work and sustainable related work or environmental related work, however you want to codify it, is subsidized. It's subsidized via tax grants or carbon credits or something that has some residual impact to the company. So most of these companies are doing a lot of these infrastructure programs to make their businesses more sustainable because it has tangible value, and that's like I said, tax credits and whatnot. And for our business, we know that there's a certain discretionary budget that companies have to do programs that involve employee engagement, actually. So we're not really taking direct. So part of I'm not going to say the trick, but part of the positioning of our product is we're somewhere around employee engagement, brand marketing, and social impact. And so where there's a budget for social impact, that's what gets spent on our product. And when there's not a budget for social impact, we can go into the human resources department and say, this is an employee engagement tool, because we're gamifying, and we'll talk about this in a second, what our actual product is. but we're gamifying sustainable behaviors. So the trade-offs are we don't get to make that call because we're too small of a fish and too big of a pond. So we're trying to go under the radar, unnoticed, until the value is achieved.
Sounds like you learned a lot from your submarine days, Tony.
That's right.
All right, that's all the questions we've got for now, but encourage folks to keep sharing questions. You've got this incredible and valuable resource here who is ready to answer your questions. So Tony, hand it back to you to keep going. And I'll continue to keep an eye on the chat.
Okay, so we'll talk about Julebug as the product. So Julebug is a sustainable engagement tool. And what we've done is we've combined a learning management system with an Instagram-like experience and gamified it so it's competitive. And so Julebug helps people educate through gamification. We engage the employees through competition. And the way this presents itself is companies will run sustainability challenges, and people will download our app and they'll run our challenges and they'll go to certain events like air drying your dishes. And we actually have real calculations of water, waste, and CO2 in the back. So we've used the EPA standards to calculate how much air drying your dishes saves. And then we use behavioral techniques to help form behaviors. So when you're playing Julebug in your company, you can compete against each other, but we're teaching you on how to do these things. So we're raising the level of education and awareness on sustainable activities for individuals. Most of our companies that are on our platform will start by using our base content, and then they'll start creating their own programming. So they'll get people's attention on sustainable behaviors, and then they'll slowly progress them into doing something that's very specific for that company. So there's a lot of examples that we'll talk about. One example was IKEA. IKEA was a global customer for a number of years. They ran a sustainable sourcing challenge for their teams that do product sourcing. And so the idea was to engage them in an activity that would help them think about more sustainable packaging, using wood that was grown in a sustainable way. And so they ran this challenge that was very specific to IKEA, and we helped them create that content through our experience. And on our platform, we've curated 200 plus actions that people engage in all across the landscape of ESG programming, but really focused on sustainability. So sustainable engagement, fitness, beat plastic, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have some content in there, ocean protection challenge, nutrition, etc. And a lot of these categories overlap. So if you were going to do a fitness challenge and you're riding your bike to work, well, that's also saving CO2 because you're not using your car. And there's also a public version of Julebug. So if anybody wanted to try it, it's free for 10 people if you wanted to play around with it. We'll open up a version. We talked about potentially opening up a version if you wanted to use it for one of your classes, but you can download Julebug now. You can play with it on your own. You can check it out, and we'd love your feedback if you've got ideas about how to make it better. But a couple of things that we focus on is measuring carbon footprint calculator. So we have all of the employees, customers run a carbon footprint calculator to get a baseline of what their footprint is. We continuously enhance their knowledge and skills around ESG related programming, particularly around sustainability. And then we share their journey with fellow colleagues. So they're, like I said, if you can see on the right, a little bit of an Instagram type feel, so you can see how people are going through the process, what activities they're taking. They share photos. That photo then can be used as part of their ESG report. It can be used as part of their marketing campaigns. We do private labels. So a lot of companies who use our product want to have brand aligned apps. And so like KPMG has a version of Julebug. A number of companies do. A couple of our really cool success stories is last year we helped Netflix activate their Wild for All docuseries. And we actually had, so Wild for All was the private label for Julebug. And we actually had former President Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama tweet about it, which was really cool because we got a ton of excitement and interaction from that. And that was probably almost crashed our servers because he's got obviously a very big following. And so for this program, we engaged 311,000 participants. They performed 13 million actions and registered a savings of 160 million kilograms of CO2. And one of the other things that we've done recently is we've aligned our individual actions to the UN SDG goals so that individuals can see and companies can see how the individual actions align with the SDG goals. Another example is the program that we ran for IKEA. So IKEA had another private label. The Better Living app was actually Jewelbug, was built by Jewelbug, or it was Jewelbug's private label. And so they ran global actions around 25 countries, 2 million plus actions, 20 different languages, over 100,000 users engaged, and you can see some of the savings there. Again, water, waste, and CO2. And so one of the things from just to kind of conclude my portion of the discussion here, we can leave it open for some questions, that combining something that I was very interested in, the sustainable activity, with a profitable business model allowed us to not only create the opportunity to drive revenue, but it also allowed us to do something that I'm pretty passionate about personally, which is educate people to sustainable engagement. And so in just our general campaign, last year, we added 400,000 net new users. Those 400,000 users logged almost 400,000 sustainable actions, 100 and almost 200,000 photos. And then you can see the water, waste, and CO2 from that group, and a couple other screenshots of our product, which we're really proud of. And I think that's it. So I'll take a break and breath, and if there are any questions, we'll open it up.
Yes, we have a question from Elle in the chat. And so I want to see if Elle can take themselves off of mute and is able to share their question. And then it looks like Jada has raised their hand. So we'll go to Jada next. Elle, do you want to share your question with Tony?
Yes, so I had two. The first one was about internship opportunities, and if your company has any, and if so, like what exactly those look like.
We do. Actually, we have a requirement that every department fields an intern. And we're given our proximity to NC State. So there should be one posted now online. So if you're interested in it, or if you want to, I'll leave my thing. And if you want to send me your resume, you can do that, and I can point you in the right direction.
Yeah, are
But
those
yes, we
offered,
always have internships.
okay, are those offered over the summer or through the school year?
They're evergreen. So we hire about 20% of our staff has come through internship programs. And so when they matriculate, the internship opportunity opens back up.
Awesome.
Some people
Thank
stay the summer, some people want to work all year round. We prefer the latter. We prefer people to stay consistent because whether even if they reduce their number of hours, it helps with some of that education and training and about the unique things about working at Karamis.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And then my other question was more about the business and like how much you guys charge for your services and what that kind of looks like.
For Jewelbug individually, our pricing is online. So it's about $1.29 per user per month, which obviously is not very much. It's, it's maybe a lunch, one lunch per your employee to have the sustainable content at their fingertips. We do customization. So what our larger customers could look like, $50,000 a year. Some of our smaller to mid-sized businesses might do $500 a month. People can use their credit card to get online, but essentially outside of customization, it costs about $1.29 per user per month.
Awesome. Thank you.
My pleasure.
All right, thank you, Elle, for those great questions. I saw a hand, I think, from Jada. Jada, do you still have a question?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this. This has been really awesome. I have a question for you about people who are studying in the area of social innovation. I feel that I kind of have a long way to go. So what sort of advice do you have for someone who's looking for fitting roles to develop in the area before they're ready to fully be able to engage?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, there's like this curve about the younger you are, the less money you need, which creates the best opportunity to be an entrepreneur. You know, the older you get, the more kids you have, the more stuff you have, the harder it becomes to start a business. I would say my advice would be is understand how a business operates before you try to apply your social impact theme to that business. So for instance, if you understand how to read a P&L, a balance sheet, or a cash statement, and you understand how any business can operate, then you can apply whatever it is that you're passionate into a functional business model. If you go the other way and you start with whatever you're passionate about, you'll kind of fumble through and then eventually get to an adaptive business model, which may not be what you want to do. You know, it may not eventually, by the time you say, I want to do X, Y, and Z, and you find out where you can make money, you might be completely off what your mission is. And so my experience was when I started with Good Bookie, I was thinking, even though I knew how to run a business, I mean, I had been running businesses for 15 years. I thought that because it was good, people will care. And the root truth is that they don't. You have to think about how to create a functioning business, and that provides an impact. So I would say, you know, learn how to run a business. And as a young person, going to work for a startup is a great way to do that.
Yes, sir. Fantastic. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thanks, Jada, for that great question as well. So I'll continue to encourage folks to share questions in the chat. And I might ask questions while we're waiting for more questions to come. I might go one step before Jada's question. You know, Tony, I love the way you shared your why, which, if I can kind of paraphrase what you shared, really solving complicated problems with people you like to interact with. And so I was wondering if you had any advice for the students on the call for how they get to their why. Like, how did you kind of come to that why? And but for those students who are still trying to figure out their passion, their why, and part of what I'm hoping is to see that it's a journey, right? It's
Yeah.
not that you necessarily have to, but I'm just curious kind of what that process looked like for you, and any advice you can share with our students on how to get there, or when it or even if you ever really get there, that's kind of an evolving,
Well,
approach.
you're both never there, but you're always there, because it is an evolution, and you can, you know, most people's core principles don't really change, but their understanding of how to apply those principles will change, particularly as you mature and get older. For me, I'm an engineer mentality, so I tend to be very pragmatic. So every problem has a solution or a series of solutions. There's one statement that I really love is don't probe for deeper meaning. If there's something that feels like drawing you in a direction, that's the direction that you should be figuring out. So for me, I came to the conclusion because I thought I loved solving problems. And I thought when I was younger, I loved solving them for money. And what I realized is that the money wasn't as fulfilling as once your basic needs are met, the money has less utility. And then the interesting thing for me was, who am I surrounding myself with, and what's the scale of the problem that we're solving? If it's a problem that's, if it has an impact or it goes back to that triple bottom line, I thought that was cool. I thought solving a triple bottom, I thought you must be able to create a profitable business that is good for people and good for the planet. And so but I also had the benefit of a lot of varied experiences. And so I'm not trying to say that there's one track for anybody, but you have to expose yourself to lots of different opportunities and lots of different types of people. Traveling, one of the really great things about being in the military is that you go all over the world. And then in the course of my 20 years of business, I went all over the world. And I'm sure most of you wouldn't be surprised to know that most other countries, particularly in Europe, are way ahead of us when it comes to environmentalism. And so there's a lot to learn. There's a lot that you can see that it's fine not to ever use plastic. If you go to Paris, there's no plastic bags, there's no plastic bottles, there's no straws, or very few straws, unless it's to stir your little coffee. but you can see how people are living differently. And I think opening yourself up to the experiences is a big, it was a big opportunity for me.
Thank you for sharing that advice. I love that idea that you're always there and you're never there, right? When you're in the process of figuring out your why, your passion, your mission. It's an ongoing process. And I just want to say for those students who are still on the call, I think your advice is really apt, right? Expose yourself to different people, different experiences, different opportunities. And so I think the students on this call are doing just that by having the opportunity to connect and learn from you. So thank you for sharing that advice and also being that advice as well. All right, I'm gonna do another call for questions in the chat. I might just ask you another question or two myself, Tony.
I think
And
Rachel was raising her hand.
Rachel, yes, please.
Sorry, I was physically raising my hand because I guess
Oh, I
I
didn't see you.
in
Go ahead.
class.
Rachel. Yes, please.
Yeah, I was wondering if you could comment a little bit about the company culture at Karamis. I've heard a lot of stories, of founders and, once they build a solid business and it starts to scale and they're bringing in more people, I've heard them say like it's kind of challenging to maintain and build a solid company culture, and especially with a company like yours that has obviously a good social environmental mission. How have you gone about doing that, and how do you continue to build your company's culture?
That's a good question. And in fact, as part of our evolution, we got away from some of the really cool cultural things that we created. Again, because we were running Karamis during an interesting time. COVID, of course, had a big impact on a lot of small businesses. And then after that, we had the Great Resignation, and then the fear of inflation, or the actual inflation, the fear of the recession. And we had an opportunity. We started with this idealistic mindset of we're only going to do high impact projects. The problem is that we didn't have enough people who wanted to buy those high impact projects to maintain a profitable business. And then we kind of shifted into this idea of we're just going to create a sustainable business, not worry about that. But then we had a cultural issue because we were working with people who weren't value aligned. So we had a whole litany of people who didn't appreciate what it takes to run a company while taking care of people, while doing things that are interesting. You lose a little bit economically. So you can't want to be the highest paid person and have opportunities to do things that change the world. There's a give and take there. And so what we tried to do culturally is find people that understood there is a concession economically that we make for the right to do things and the right to pursue good business and not to do things that are not accretive to our values. The long way to say is the way that we maintained our culture is by almost losing it and then deciding to go back to the basics and reinforce it. So we've got a couple cultural pillars that aren't really about doing sustainable impact work, but that helps shape our recruiting. So people come to us because they like that idea. So Care I Must kind of stands for that aspect of not just doing something for the world, but doing something for the individual, doing something for our clients, et cetera, or the community. And so when we shaped our pillars, we were thinking about going back to really the interesting things. It's funny, I think I have it somewhere, but we have this stickers that maybe I can send them out if I can find it. But so if you can see it here, everybody has this kind of sticker that when we decided we were going to go back to our basics, it just says interesting things with interesting people, which is a nicer way than saying interesting things with people we like. So to maintain the culture, you have to first define what it is, and then you cannot make any concessions to your brand values.
Thank you, Rachel. Another great question. And thank you, Tony. I think that was really interesting to see kind of the importance of culture, but also the evolution of culture at Karamis and how you kind of came back, found your way back home, back to the core culture. So we've got a few minutes left. I might just, professor's prerogative, ask one last question. I don't see any other questions in the chat. But before I do that, I was wondering, I know your last slide has your contact information. And so if you wanted to go ahead and put that up, and you can kind of let folks know if you're comfortable with having folks reach out to you over email, reach out over LinkedIn and connect, especially for those who've stayed all the way to the end of the call.
Sure.
And
Yes,
so,
you can. I would appreciate if you would follow Jewelbug on LinkedIn. Certainly Karamis as well. But if you have specific questions, you want to shoot them to me via email, I'm happy to field them the best I can. And yeah, I mean, we're just down the street. So if people want to come see our business, it's just another office. It's not that exciting, but if you wanted to come check it out, we're certainly happy to do that. If we have events or something like that, just if you follow us on our socials and you wanted to come to an event that we're hosting, you're welcome to do that as well.
all right. Thank you for making all those offers. So I might just make my last question more of a wrap up, but when you mentioned the Jewelbug app and how you've essentially embedded the UN Sustainable Development Goals as kind of a lens through which you're evaluating the impact of all of these collective actions, I thought that was really interesting because here at NC State, we have such a strong focus on embedding the UN Sustainable Development Goals into our teaching. And we actually have I just want to make sure all the students know, and you, Tony, as an alum, know that we've actually got a database of classes that include the UN SDGs that you can sort by college, you can sort by SDG, and so it's undergrad and grad classes. I think last time I checked, there were over 600 classes across NC State that cover one or more UN Sustainable Development Goal in the class. And this has really been a big kind of core lens through which we look at sustainability as a university. So I just wanted to note that parallel. And so I might just say in closing, I think it was just a couple things that really stood out to me in your talk, and that remind me how grateful we are to have our alumni come back and speak. The fact that you highlighted your failures, and not just the failure, but what you learned from it, I think is such an incredibly powerful message for our students to recognize that, entrepreneurial journeys and all of our journeys aren't all rosy and perfect. And oftentimes I think successful people kind of paint their stories as here's all the great things I did and here's how I accomplished all these wonderful things. But there are going to be hurdles, there are going to be challenges. And what can you learn, right, from those inevitable, right, failures and challenges? The focus of your work on education and engagement, right? That's what we are doing here at NC State. And it's so inspiring to see how you have developed a set of platforms, tools for doing that on such an enormous and impactful scale, and how important both of those pieces are, right? Education and engagement to us collectively being able to solve these huge challenges, right? Social and environmental challenges that we face. And so I just want to say thank you so much once again for coming back, sharing your time, sharing your expertise, sharing your inspiration with us and all the students. We are so grateful to have you as part of our Wolf Pack. So I just want to say go Pack in
Go
closing.
Pack.
And thanks so much for everybody who stayed until the end. I'm really grateful for all the great questions, the engagement, and we can't wait for you to come back as alumni when you all go out there and graduate and do amazing things. And so I hope the Business Sustainability Collaborative can continue to be a resource for students across campus to help prepare you to be impactful leaders. We need you. And this work is so important and so urgent. So keep in touch. We'll have at least one more speaker in our career speaker series. And for all the MBA 582 students and all the MIE 306 students who came out, thanks so much. I look forward to seeing you all back in class very soon. And special thanks to Tony, our guest speaker, and also special thanks as well to Rachel Haynes, our program manager. Always grateful for all of your work, Rachel. We are so grateful to have you on the team.